Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, it is Georgie here from the Blink team. I've got a fabulous speaker here with me today who I will introduce properly shortly. But a big warm welcome as you are all dialing in. Please let us know where you're tuning in from. I can already see we've got people from Abu Dhabi, we've got Arizona. Hello, everybody. Somebody from Yorkshire. Hello, a lovely contingent from across the globe. Please introduce yourself and let us know where you're joining from today. And you can see the attendee chat there on the side. We would love for you to stick in there throughout the session and ask Jen those burning questions that you've got all around all things trust. So hello everyone, thank you so much for joining. It's Georgie here from the Blink team. How are you all today? It's actually going to be a 4-day weekend in the UK. Sorry everybody else who's not in the UK to rub it in, but my goodness, I'm excited about that. But if not, happy hump day. Hello everybody, we've got some more people joining from Michigan. Hi Amber, hi Cassandra. I've got Christy from Ohio. Hello Christy. Dennis from Montreal. Hello, thank you so much for joining us. Right, I'm going to get started. Otherwise, Jen is just sitting there looking pretty. We need to get into it. But welcome today to another Blink webinar. I'm Georgie from the marketing team, and we're getting into a really juicy discussion today, all things around trust and what that means for building culture and specifically during internal change. And hopefully a lot of you are in these roles, whether that's in the people team, you're looking at people experience or in internal comms, and you know that trust can be the foundation of a high performing team and organization. Delighted that we've got Jen with us. So Jen, it's very boring if I introduce you. So would you like to introduce yourself to everybody today and explain why you're here?
Sure. It's so funny, right? When we started chatting, Georgie, I think we talked a lot about communications and comms, and I think there was thrown around like, oh, you're a comms expert. And I was like, whoa. I can never claim to be a comms expert. There are people probably on this webinar who are certified comms experts. I identify as being a broker of trust, right? So I really help individuals and companies think about how trust is earned and built. And where trust can fracture and erode and how you repair it over time, right? And so oftentimes when I'm working with clients, I talk about, we have 2 jobs in our work, right? It is first to get people on the path with us, right? And second is to get them to stay. And so if I'm on a team or with colleagues or in a company, my first question is, do I trust you enough to step on that path? And then do I trust you enough to stay? And it's at moments of transition or at moments of, transformation or change where you either see that trust is strong in an institution or it just opens up and shows you how fragile and how fractured it is, right? And so today I'm really excited to talk to folks or to talk to you, but have all the folks on this call because most of the folks here are the ones that sit at the crossroads or the intersections of all of this and hold, all of the transformation, all of the change, all of the transition, and make sure that, things make sense. They're doing the translation work, the bridge building work. And so it can feel like a lot. And I think there's a better way for us to do things. So that's me.
Here we are. That's amazing. And thank you. And I honestly, we've only hung out very briefly as a result of speaking today, but I genuinely feel there was no one better to unpack this with. So thank you, Jen, so much for joining us today. I'm very excited. If we've got time, we'll get into Jen's amazing background there because there's a story behind all of those artifacts behind her. But if you're new to a Blink webinar, welcome to Hubbelow, our platform. There's a chat here and there's also a particular Q&A box. So if you have a question for Blink or for Jen, or just, for the crew, then plop it in there or in the attendee chat. We'll be monitoring those throughout the session. I can see one question's already come in just to say, will you be recording the session? And yes, we absolutely will. But don't leave us. You're here now. Welcome. So if you've been on a Blink session before, you know that we don't like to do a traditional webinar. And first things first is that we need to start with a bit of forced fun. So I did ask Jen to conduct some homework. I hope that's a genuine laugh, Jen. And I ask everyone to do a bit of forced fun, which is to do a drawing. No AI generated images are allowed. This needs to, arguably, I think we said the worse the better, a hand drawing for what organizational trust looks like. Now, Jen, have you done your homework?
Yes, because I told you I'm a straight A student, so of course I did. Now, I'm not an artist, although I might play one on TV because I'm really proud of my
Oh, okay, big talk. Let's see it.
It's very intuitive, and I'll explain it, but you have to guess, right? You have to try to guess what I've drawn, right?
Exactly. So let's see it. And everybody in the chat, let me know. Oh my goodness. I was expecting some pencil. This is a painting. Okay, everybody who's on the session, what are we seeing? Tell me in the chat. I'm seeing
a
desert landscape, and I'm seeing.
Can you see it? It's like I can't see what the camera showing.
Is it like Aladdin's lamp?
Kind of looks like it, but it's not. Nice try.
We've got is it aroma diffuser? A ship on water? A flock of birds?
No. Yes. Trust in organizations looks like an aroma diffuser. It's just getting the scent out there far and wide.
There we go. Well, I did say Aladdin's lamp. It could be Aladdin's lamp. You get 3 wishes in your organization. That's it. Beehive being released. Swifts returning home for the night. Oh, love these suggestions. Thank you, everyone. Jen, tell us.
Okay, it is a murmuration. So Sue was closest. It is a murmuration. So if anyone knows me, I'm obsessed with murmurations. So these are, like starling birds, little birds. You can do this later. Don't go now because you have to focus on this conversation. But go on Google, do some research. National Geographic has an amazing spread about this. I just saw BBC did something about a murmuration that was in the UK. Tens of thousands of birds, okay, that fly in coordinated, sort of effort together. And so, it's kind of eerie when you see them. Someone said they can't hear. Hopefully everyone else can. But the birds are flying all around. There's some photos you can see they actually look like a bird. They make images.
They're so in sync. And they're perfectly formed. Yeah.
Performance, right? And so the reason that I love to think about this as organizational trust is because, you look at this in our minds, right? We think how is it possible that all the tens of thousands of birds, I'm not being hyperbolic, could be flying together in this coordinated fashion so beautifully, eerily, and who's in charge? How does it work, right? How do they make this happen? How does one bird over here in this corner communicate with this bird all the way over here? And so the reality is that what they're doing is they're focusing on their small circle. Let's say about 7 birds, right? So these 7 birds are worried about themselves and then the next 7 and the next 7 and the next 7 and the next 7 and the next 7. And that is how they create this beautifully orchestrated experience, right? And they can navigate against predators together. They can navigate against weather together. They can navigate against sick birds together. It is one of the most beautiful things you can ever imagine. So I take a lot of inspiration in the work that I do with clients around murmuration and with trust around murmuration. Think about how much trust it takes for a bird to do this, right, in order to move. So that's my view of my hope for, I should say, organizational trust.
Jen, that is glorious. Please, can you frame that and put it on LinkedIn? Because that is a beautiful analogy for the conversation today. And I had no idea. Is anyone else taking note that they need to tune in to this BBC documentary of murmuration? Thank you so much. And we've got a poll today as well. I'd love to know what brings everybody here today. Is it to learn about murmuration? We didn't actually put that as a poll option, but please let us know what brings you here today. And it gives us a good sense to steer our conversation as well. So you should see a poll there on the right to get involved with. Let's see these answers coming in. We've got, I don't think you can all see the answers, so I'll read them out. But the winning answer right now is equally split between you're going through major change and you're here to learn and stay ahead. I would say that's a healthy cocktail. Thank you for getting involved in the poll. Keep us posted. And don't forget, there is a Q&A box, which Jen and I will get to throughout the session. And also, this is just a lovely community. We're here for good vibes. So stay active in the chat and share stories, and please get involved throughout today's session as well. Right, Jen, should we get into it?
Yeah.
Ready? Okay. Right. Here we go. Yeah. Whew. Right. So let's start with this very, very core idea, right? We're here to talk about this hidden trust tax. What is it? You talk about this a lot. We've been advertising this, but what is it in really simple terms, right? You've got to explain this to somebody in a bar or a child. What is this?
Yeah. Quite literally, quite simply, it is the invisible cost of operating when things don't make sense. I mean, that's it, right? When you have incoherence, right? So when things don't make sense to the parties involved, yet we are still trying to move forward, we ultimately pay a tax. And I think it happens sort of in two ways. One is either through execution, and then you later pay through interpretation, right? And so we'll talk about like what that means, but you pay double tax, right? Because how you move and what you're trying to accomplish suffers, and sort of the things that we interpret or take from what's happening around us begin to create fractures in trust as well, right? And so that causes a suffer as well. So what happens is, and what, like, there's a lot of like tea leaves. I'm sure that everyone on this call has seen sort of these indications of these little fractures or fissures that are happening in their system around them, particularly around like moments of big change and transformation, which is like, okay, rework, right? So you're sitting on a team and, you know, your leader is telling you to do something, but in your mind, you know, it's not going to work. Right? Like, this is not going to make sense the way that they're wanting me to do this. I know enough about my role, my contribution, that ultimately this isn't going to work. And lo and behold, down the line, you're unraveling and redoing, right? Or, you know, you feel there's a disconnect from what the leaders are telling you in the company versus what you're seeing on the ground. But yet you just have to continue to rework the corporate hamster wheel, you might say, right? Yeah. Or the worst is like, so you know that it's not going to work. So you're just like, I'm going to put this over here. I'm not going to do this right now because I believe that like this may not actually happen. So I'm going to just leave it here and go focus on some other things because they're going to sort this out later. But what does that do, right? Or the delay, which is just like, okay, so the leaders, the right people aren't in the room to make decisions. We can't agree. So we're constantly relitigating things over and over and over again. And ultimately, it creates this like emotional load, right? Which is, I sit here bracing myself because I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm waiting for some drama to happen, something else to happen, you know, some pivot or, you know, go backwards to go forwards to happen. So now I'm just under stress. And so if it's one person, yeah, but we know that's not true, right? It's one person times another, times a team, times multiple teams, times functions, right? So when you have that level of, you know, sort of fracture, now you have a clogged system, you have a brittle system, right? And so everything that you're trying to do becomes bogged down and dragged by all of these fissures, these fractures. And it's little. And so you can continue to, you know, push forward and do the work you're doing, and you deal with imperfect systems all the time. But when you're in these crucible moments of high change and high transformation or business leader transition, right? All of that just blows up because you can see as you're trying to push something big through the system, all these little fractures become big, right? And so that is exactly what we talk about trust tax.
Yeah. And Jen, how have you got some examples of like where you're actually really seeing this show up? I know we've spoken through this like in certain rooms or with certain leaders or across the organization, but it seems like in the chat a lot of people are really feeling this, but you can't quite name it. So have you got, you know, in your time and some real examples where you're like, this is where I went into this situation and I saw what you're paying here is this, you know, trust tax?
I have. And so I'm going to hold off a little bit because I'm going to use one example get later into the conversation to really drill into like what it could, you know, when it breaks down, what it looks like and how you might position it. But I'll say that this is the type of stuff that you see when a CEO is leading, right? So particularly in startups, right? You think about the founder CEO is transitioning out, the next CEO is coming in, or the next leadership team is coming in, right? So you're inheriting something new, right? You see this when you're adding new strategic scope or focus to your business, right? So you're bolting on or creating something new. You have, when you have mergers and acquisitions, right? Two, what I call darlings, right? Two, you know, beautiful companies that are doing beautiful things in the world in their respective corners coming together, right? And wanting to merge. What is that? How does that work? right? So these really sort of key moments, high growth. So startups, you get infused with capital, you get infused with investment. You have now a new venture partner. And so there's pressure, right, to now all of a sudden grow. So you're hiring new people, you're growing into new markets, you're expanding your product reach. All of this pressure creates pressure on the system. So if you haven't really figured out how the system operates, any sort of external, internal pressure, additive thing will start to then break apart the system that you have that you're working with. Does that make sense?
It does. And thanks for the little teaser. I love when you're like, I'm actually going to get into that, but later. So there's a little teaser for later. But why does it get to this point? Like, why is it that organizations are almost missing it? I do feel there's safe space, everybody on the call today, right? As comms professionals, people leaders, and you can see these things, but why is it as organizations we tend to miss this until it starts to really affect performance, or you get to the point of the critical change process, or the M&A, or a leader changing? Why do you get to that point, and why is it something that we're missing until then?
Okay, so I'm going to jump forward then, because I think it's just like the way safe space, right? We're talking safe space. It's effectively like, what have we built? The question becomes, what have we built? What's the house that the house that Jack built, right? Have we built a house that is on a strong slab foundation? Does it have the ability to absorb shocks and movement of the earth around it? Or have we built a house of cards, right? Now, I'm not saying companies are about to just blow away in the wind, but what I am saying is when we think about sort of all of these things that are moving through our system, have we built the structure and the infrastructure to absorb and move things and build a responsive system versus a fragile or brittle system, right? And so there are ways that we think about the conditions to build trust, right? Which I'll go into. There's 6 of them that you and I have chatted about that we here at Signal really focus on. But I think before we get into it, one of the things I want to stress is the first sort of test that you might do as you sit in your organizations is, have we built a system that is control-based versus responsive, right? And when I say control, what I mean is, do things feel tight? Right? Do we do a lot of top-down drops, right? So leaders are talking to people a lot, reiterating messages. It's about the narrative. It's about making sure that people are aligned to the vision and on the path, but in a way that feels forced and controlled versus coherent and responsive, right? So, if we have a system where signals go both ways, not just top down, right? Where things happen locally, right? That can reach leaders, right? Those kinds of things. The system adapts in real time. Those are responsive systems, right? Control systems are the ones that we tend to operate all the time. And then when things happen that are newer, we're introducing into our system, the control gets tighter. And see, control will not keep people on the path. You can get someone on the path by telling them step on the path. But when it gets hard, people will retreat. Right? And so control only gets you so far. And when control is trying to create consistency, when control is trying to create an environment where people are aligned, right? You can do that, but only for so long. And so the thing you're trying to prevent is actually the thing you create. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it sounds terrifying.
It's terrifying. But I mean, this is why people are tired, right? This is why people are exhausted and tired and stressed, why they want to stay home and work from home versus going into the office, right?
Yeah.
Because this environment is not one where people are set up to thrive, right? And what we're seeing is that these institutions, these companies are reaching a threshold, a ceiling, right? Where the ways in which they build system and infrastructure are crumbling and are not working. And the reality is because there are so many more people coming into a system that they're not feeling they're able to contribute meaningfully. They're not feeling that their contributions have value. They don't have the agency or space to talk about what they see and share that out in a way that helps move the institution forward, right? So that's where like all of this stuff starts to break down. And we've just been building systems that inherently aren't wired for trust. Right. I'll stop. I'm like on a rant.
Yeah, I was like, shall I leave? No. Jen, previously we've talked a lot about how organizations run, where that momentum comes from, and you're in the day to day and you say organizations are running on information. So how do people, we started talking about some signals and around sense making, but how do people start to interpret these, and can you unpack that a bit more? And I know we just spoke about some of the pain points of people wanting to feel connected and be doing meaningful work and be thriving, not surviving in the workplace. So I'd love to know a little bit more around your thinking around these signals and how people are starting to interpret that. Can you give us your Gen take and unpack that a bit more?
Yeah. So, it's, how do I want to say this? When there's the things we do, and then there's the things that we that aren't necessarily like manifest in physical things. It's the vibes. It's the ether, right? So we can see the unspoken, right? So like we can see in a company, right, when someone does something, right? So we announce a strategy, we launch a new product, right? We exit a market, we, are growing year over year by X percent, or we're shrinking year over year by X percentage, right? These are the physical manifestations of the things that we're doing in our companies. But underneath all of that are not only the steps to get to that expression, but it's all the interstitial tissue, all of the vibes or the ether that lives around each of those steps, right? So what I mean by that is, like, how painful is it to get to that new market, right? Or that new product, right? Or how easy or efficiently did we actually do that work to grow into a new shoe size, right? And so people are watching that more than they're watching the thing we do. So if it feels like, I've got leaders yelling at me all the time, or I don't know what I'm actually doing because no one is telling me, or it doesn't make sense how we had a conversation in January about this thing, and now in March, it seems like we're doing something completely different. I don't understand how we got here, right? So this in between, right? All of that is what people internalize. That's the interpretation that I talked about before. And that's where people start connecting the dots. It becomes, we don't know what we're doing here, right? We aren't clear on a path. The leaders here aren't good leaders, right? Or I don't feel like I can make a difference in this company, right? That's where all of that noise starts coming up. It's not necessarily in the accomplishments or the achievements. Those feel great. They're good dopamine hits. But it is like the in-between moments that really become how we determine what it actually feels like to work here and what it actually is like to work here. And that's the interpretation.
And I think that's wild, isn't it? Because it could, all those things you listed, entering a market or exiting a market, launching a new product, that's been the goal. But actually the signals and how people have actually interpreted how that's happened could actually then land very differently.
Yeah.
And then 100%. Your goal has been missed there. Yeah, definitely. And what happens then? So, we've launched a new product, or we've gone through a merger, and we've just spoken about how people have maybe interpreted it the wrong way, less than you attended. What then happens?
Well, what happens is it's a lot of the folks on this call that are really holding like the thing in between. So I just went to, this is super, super random, but it's what my head just thought of. So I'm just going to have to bear with me. I went to this thing called the Arnold Classic. Do you know what the Arnold Classic is?
The Arnold Classic, did you say?
Arnold. I'm sure you don't, because you're from the UK and maybe no one on this call actually does.
People in the studio are nodding, so it's just me. So carry on.
Yeah, everyone in the studio and there's no one there is nodding. Got it. So the Arnold Classic is Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? It is a body. Yes, Charmin. It is a bodybuilding competition. It is the world's biggest bodybuilding and weightlifting competition. And so there's this expo and they have all these booths. There's tens of thousands of people that come to Columbus, Ohio. And I went to this thing this year. It was shenanigans galore. And so, they had this thing where people would go to, no, Natalie, it's not golf, like Arnold Palmer. I get it, but no. So it's like this machine. It's not a machine. It's like these two weight things, and you hold on to like a handle, and these weights are pulling away from you, and you've got to stand and hold this weight in for as long as you can, right? And so the person that holds it over the weekend, the longest wins, I don't even know, let's say $1,000. So, I can only imagine, because I did not do it, that it must feel like you're being ripped in half, right? But this is the mental image I want you to have of the people organizations who are sitting at the intersections between what it is that we're trying to do, the company is trying to do, and what it feels like for the people who are trying to do it, right? They become the stabilizing labor, the ones that are translating. Well, leaders don't mean this, or they literally are sitting with leaders like, you can't say that, or how about if you said it this way, right? So you become the one that is sitting there trying to help. Yeah, you're like this. And you're like, I'm holding a lot. And so what folks who usually sit in this role are folks who are service oriented, right? They are oriented towards wanting to fill gaps. They see things and like, I could close that gap with my skill set. I could help here. I could do this.
Yeah.
And so you come into it from an architect's perspective, right? You're like, I could be an architect in this system, helping to navigate during these crucible moments, right? And you can. The challenge becomes that over time, a lot of our systems start putting us into maintenance mode, not architect mode. So now we're just maintaining and trying to keep people. Come on, everybody. We're like, we're like the tour guide with the umbrella. This way, people, on the path, follow me, right? And so that's not sustainable either, right? And so the opportunity becomes how, again, can we build infrastructure and systems that actually promote the responsiveness that we need in order to, get the job done.
And it's really interesting, Jen, that point. I was thinking about, especially people in internal comms or in people teams trying to communicate and reach and bring connection in the organization. And most of the time, it's not that you're trying to do effective communication. It's that you're trying to build a great culture of trust. Yes. And that's exactly it. The dream is to get in that situation and be the ultimate architect, and you get stuck in operator mode. So it's really interesting. I love the analogy, and I'm really sorry I didn't know the weightlifting Arnold Schwarzenegger reference. I will swat up next time.
Well, he and I are best friends now, and I'm going to tell him because he'll be disappointed. No, just kidding. I do not know Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right, yeah.
He looked good. He was there. I was like, okay, Arnold, go ahead.
Yeah, because he's old now, isn't he? He's like 80.
Well, we're not ageists. He's an elder.
I was admiring that he's still fighting fit at the fine age of 80.
But yeah, what you're talking about, right? It's like the little C communications, right? Versus the big C function, right? Which is really, if anything, I hope people take away from this conversation that communications has the power to be the lifeblood of all of this, right? Like if you do this well, it goes beyond narrative building. It is the ability that you have to build infrastructure and a system that is responsive and that keeps things flowing versus something that contributes to fractures and clogs and brittleness, right?
Yeah, and you speak so articulately, Jen, like it's so easy, and I think it can definitely start to feel a bit overwhelming. But you started to talk or tease to us about this idea of what's a responsive reaction, what's more in your control, and those behaviors and those buckets. But I'd love to know what are these starts of typical reactions when trust is thinning in an organization? Because there might be people, it's like, we've got a great organization, it's built on a bed of trust. So are there particular reactions or things that you could help identify when you know that trust is thinning in an organization?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, the word I use is drag, right? So where do things feel unnecessarily slow, right? Things that should feel like they could be able to move without struggle suddenly feel like they take more explanation. They take more like footnotes and, validation and data to prove more proof points, right? They more leaders coming in to convince, right? There's a lot of convincing and cajoling that has to happen to get people to do things with you, right? There's the same set of people that you constantly see that are in the business sort of doing this kind of, stabilizing labor, this work, right? So this kind of energy is stuff that you can sense well before there's actually a fracture, right? And so the opportunity is then to sort of have your eyes peeled and your spotters out there looking for these things and then doing the work of getting underneath what's happening, right? Why is this happening? There are always, places to go. So, like the proverbial water coolers, right? Like, where are people actually talking? And, the thing is that we often look at that as a negative, right? Like, oh, we're not entertaining gossip. We're not entertaining, this water cooler behavior. It's toxic. It's problematic. It undermines the spirit of what who we are and what we believe. But the reality is that there's data there, right? And so a control system, a fragile system, looks at that data as a threat and rejects it. A responsive, healthy, trust-rich environment looks at that data as insight and information to help it figure out diagnosing what's happening in the system, right?
Right.
I was on a call this week with a former client, actually, and we were kind of going down memory lane. And I'm not going to get into who the client was, but there was a moment where we had uncovered, some serious things happening within the company. It was it's an amazing global brand with an amazing legacy and story, and it's hugely adored. But there are some things that were happening for employees in the company. So we created this moment for leaders. The top leaders of the global company were coming together, and we created this immersive experience to help illuminate the good and the darker shadow sides of working there, so that as leaders, they could start thinking about these things. And it got shut down in the 11th hour. Right. So the CEO said, no, we are not this. We are optimism. We are potential. We are possibility. We are this. This is negative. This is drag. This is gossip. Right. Noise. Took it out. So we scrambled. My team scrambled. We figured out, like how to do this. And I said, hey, guys, FYI, this is the wrong choice. I will have my team pivot, but know that you're making the wrong choice. Right. Less than 6 months later, they were on the cover of the New York Times, because they were facing a class action lawsuit for exactly the things that we were trying to get them to discuss. Now, the thing is, had you at least started the conversation 6 months ago, you would be able to say, hey, we are starting the work. We know we're not there yet, but we have engaged our top 600 global leaders, and we are now trying to start this work. But because you have nothing to stand on, right? So this is the thing is there's always opportunity to know what's happening in your system. The easy thing, and I think someone said in the chat I saw, right? Like, they just want people to be quiet and get on with the job of the work. That's not how this is. Your people are paid as much for their skills that they learned in college as their insight and expertise that they bring into the company, right? So if they're saying, it's because they are keyed up to say it. They have observed and they can see what's happening, and they're trying to find any which way to express it, but they can't. So they'll do it at the water coolers, or if you're in tech, they'll do it on the Blind app, right? And they'll create toxic environments that say, oh, like, this place is crazy. Here's all the things. It manifests in a problematic way, but it's really just your people trying to tell you there's a problem. Yeah. It's the call coming from within the house, right?
And Jen, are they some of the signals that you would say this is where your organization is defaulting to more of this like control bucket? Are they these examples?
Yes. Yeah. So let's get into like enough like burning platform and scaring everyone to like jump off the ship here. Let's get into like
had a lot of love. There's some booms, there's some emojis. So I feel like everyone's still with the ship.
Yeah. So what's the path forward, right? Like, how do we start to like I like to say, build new worlds, right? Build new worlds of possibility. Like, I am never someone that's burn it all down. I believe that we have some beautiful things that we've created, right? And the opportunity is to basically, figure out like how to evolve what we have, right? Because the systems that we have now were not meant necessarily to encounter all of the things that we're facing out in the world, or even the myriad of people that sit within the four walls of these companies, right? So we have sort of identified 6 conditions that we look at with companies. And I'm going to go slowly because I take the point, Georgie, that I make it sound simple, and it probably doesn't feel that way. So I'll go slowly through this. And I'm going to use a client example. It's fairly public knowledge, but I'm not going to get too specific. But I had the opportunity a few years ago to work with a big global client. And it was definitely, for me, one of my most career shaping or informing experiences that I ever had. And I think in retrospect, it certainly is a lot of me realizing how long I've been in this trust game before I
Right.
realized I was in the trust game, right? And so, they found themselves at a moment of reckoning where an incident happened in one of their stores, and it was a racially triggered or racially induced incident. And we were brought in to help them navigate through this moment. And so I'm going to use this as the business case or the use case to talk about these 6 conditions. And let me just list them quickly, and then I'll come back to each one, right? So there are 6 things. There's proximity, there's care, there's participation, there's stewardship, there's accountability, and there's repair, right? So these are the 6 conditions that are necessary to create trust, both at the relational level and scaled at the institutional level. And so when I talk about proximity, what I mean is how close are you to the community, the people, the employees that you are working with and in service of, right? And the big sort of question is, are you solving on behalf of, or are you solving alongside of? And so as an example for this, with this company that I mentioned earlier, right, the situation was that a manager made a decision to bring in authorities in response to a situation that was happening in their store. When they made that choice, they thought they were acting in line with the store policy, right? The company policy, which was when anything happening outside comes into the store and people in the store feel threatened, customers, employees, whatever, you call authorities. You do not try to intervene, right? This was a policy that went through all of the standard operating procedures protocol for the company, right? They did all of the work on the operational side to develop a very well-intended policy. The challenge came that they didn't consider that human bias would be entered into the execution of that policy, right? So therefore, they missed that. Now, the interesting thing is as soon as I and my team got into the work, we ended up having conversations with employees that were directly impacted by this situation. And they said, we knew this was going to happen. It was inevitable because we could see how it was happening in the store, what the managers were doing, but no one ever asked us. And we had no way of, right? So this is proximity, right? So everyone in the corporate center has the best of intentions trying to solve a real life problem that is happening in these stores.
Yeah.
But the question is, who's in the room helping you figure out the solution? Again, are you solving half of, or are you solving alongside of? Proximity is the first thing. The second thing is care, right? So care becomes then the question of the way that I would say it is, we talk a lot about the unintended consequences of innovation, right? We talk about moving fast and breaking things. But the question becomes, who gets left behind in that wake? Right? Who's stuck picking up the glass or picking up the glass off of them? The care is about ensuring that what we do, we are being mindful of who we're protecting via our policies, our procedures, our moves in market, right? The decisions we make about employees, right? How are we caring for those that we are working alongside with, both internally and externally in our company, right? Care was exhibited in this moment clearly because they took what kind of was necessary and said, hey, we need to pause, invest a lot of time and effort and money into course correcting and having this conversation. But, we need to exhibit care. Participation, though, is, again, this breakdown that I talked about is who is actually be able to communicate and share their perspectives, right? And so participation at the corporate level or the company level becomes all of the data that you're gathering, technology, use data, consumer data, employee data, all of that. But do employees themselves, do your consumers themselves have the opportunity to participate in the systems that are affecting them, right? And again, in this example, they didn't. And so this is where we got to, right? So how do you do that? And the bigger question for institutions is, so if we're getting all of this, how do we have discernment? How do we understand all of the data that we are getting from all of the different places and spaces and discern what matters most as we're trying to navigate, right? And so then it becomes around participation with discernment for institutions. Okay, am I good? You're good? Should I keep going?
I'm hooked. I hope everybody else is. I'm Tell me more.
Okay. So stewardship then is my favorite, right? Because it reframes the way that we think about our roles as companies and as leaders, right? Because right now, even when we think about sustainability, there is still a sort of near term perspective that we carry around the impact that we have, right? Stewardship means that we are a part of a longer arc, that we are only joining for a period of time on that arc, and our contribution is to help further that arc. We are responsible for stewarding and protecting this thing, this institution, these relationships, whatever they might be. We realize there's value here that's bigger than us, and our job is to contribute to ensure that that can continue, right? So then the decisions that we make are not extractive. They're not quarterly. They're not short term. We're thinking around the longer arc, around what do our efforts today mean for this company, for my team, for whatever, longer than even me maybe being here, right? It changes our orientation. So like, for an example, as we think about this, like, certainly having the conversation was necessary that they ended up having with all of their many hundreds of thousands of employees. It also would mean, though, that we're thinking about beyond just the training. We're thinking about where is the system creating these things that are going to perpetually put us in this situation, right? Which leads us to accountability, because accountability says, hey, it's not enough for us to just say, hey, like, we didn't mean it. Look at our intentions, right? Accountability is, what is the impact of our actions? And let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge that we have a system that put our people in a position where they were having to navigate things poorly, because that's all they had. And so we take accountability for that. And the last piece is repair says we have the capacity to repair. We assume that by definition, humans are flawed. Our systems are going to be flawed. We will have missteps. We will have fractures. So therefore, we must build into our systems the capacity to repair. And so we won't just look at this as, oh, they did it, it's their fault, hold the employees accountable. We will look at the system and say, how do we change this system so this never happens again? Not just here, but anywhere else, right? So proximity, care, participation, right? Stewardship, accountability, and repair are the 6 levers that have to be there. And so I'll pause there before I move into, anything else.
Amazing. And I just wanted to note that a lot of people are asking whether there's a transcript for this. And yes, there'll be this available on demand, which is on YouTube, and that YouTube automatically transcripts things. But we'll be working with Jen to snippet this up to be useful as well if you're not able to write everything down. Jen, those 6 are incredibly powerful, but not necessarily always easy to identify or to build or to ensure. And are these your 6 sort of golden nuggets that you use to help even diagnose the problem as well? This example you use, is this when you'd go into an organization and maybe people join you say, could you use these 6 as almost a diagnosis of where we are on our sort of trust scale as a business?
100%, right? Because a lot of times, folks will come with the expression of the fracture. Right. So we're having this issue. These things are breaking down. The sort of administration or the C-suite or the leaders are in one camp and the people are in another, and it's a divide. Right. And so how do you really wrestle? We're not just fixing this, we need to fix the systemic infrastructural issues that are driving what we're seeing, right? And so these 6 pillars or 6 conditions help us really get to what actually is happening, and they focus our work, right? So that we can actually, because we don't like to actually do work that won't lead to enduring change, and to be honest, like, we won't work with leaders who don't understand that the way that they've led won't serve them going forward. Like, if they have the ambition to actually want to be an enduring company in the future, right, then they can't have brittle systems. They can't have fragile systems. They have to understand that there needs to be a responsive mechanism and way of working, and that in that means they have to change their receptivity, their ability to metabolize the friction, the contrast that comes in, right? Like, I talk about difference a lot and contrast a lot, right? Because in this hyper sort of politicized moment we sit in around all of these like vernacular and, alphabet soup, right? The reality is at the end of the day, we hire people who bring different skill sets into our companies, and that's the value that they bring. And our ability to unleash people's potential and ability to contribute to their fullest extent is the degree to which we will be successful or not as a company. Right. And so with that, you don't get to say, come into my company, bring your brilliance and all your innovation and ideas, but only focus them on the thing that we hired you for. Right. It's that person is a whole person, and they're going to look out there and do the work with the client, the customer, the market, the whatever. And then they're going to turn around and look inside and do the work too here and say, like, this stuff is not working either. So you have to be able to, as leaders in the future, understand that these whole humans, the embodied people, need to be able to contribute, and you need to be able to metabolize their contributions. And you need to be able to do it in a way that helps them understand what you take and what you don't, right? So I'm always a big thing around, like, transparency is bull. Like, transparency is not real. Clarity is what you should be striving for. And consistency, so that people understand the whys behind things, the how we got there, right? They can understand what I need to know, and what you're telling me is none of my business, right? But be clear with people and create clarity. Don't try to promise transparency, because that's not realistic. I don't need to see in every room, right? But I do need to understand why I can't. Oh, because I will die if I open that door. I will not open that door, right? So these are the things that are really necessary as we build this going forward. And the opportunity with communications, and this is where I was like, can I make a plug for Blink? Because I think Blink is amazing. Tools like platforms like Blink offer us an opportunity to start to build the thoroughfare, right? The responsiveness that we're talking about, right? Done well, these are not just tools that shout at your employees. They're tools that help you get close, have proximity to what your teams are saying and what individuals are saying, right? To be able to pull their information out and up or central, so that people are able to understand the impact of and what's happening in your business, right? People can start to feel their fingerprints on the work. They can understand where they can see themselves in it. They can see where their contribution, their idea, their concern was taken into account, and maybe where it wasn't moved on, but at least I was heard, right? There's ways for us to actually be able to use systems like this very intentionally to help drive the kinds of responsiveness that we want to see through these conditions.
Jen, it's really powerful, and thank you for the shameless plug. I appreciate it. And I think you're right, and that clarity piece is so powerful, because I think the word transparency gets thrown around, and actually I feel like I learned at a young age from an amazing leader, you just have to be so black and white. People do not respond to grey. And it's, preach. But I wanted to know, we're saying a lot on this call, we think this and we should be doing this and we do this. I'm interested to know, and do let us know in the chat what your roles are. Are you sitting in an internal comms role? Are you in a people team? But Jen, where do you see the role of comms sitting in this entire sphere of everything that you've spoken about today?
Well, I think, again, my vision, my hope for comms and the function of comms is that it can move out of this stabilizing sort of position, right? Stabilizing is fine when you are an architect, right? When you are actually helping to build towards the evolution of an institution or a brand or a company. When you are just in maintenance and you're just keeping things copacetic so that they don't fall apart, that's where the trouble happens. So my hope is that comms begins to be repositioned less as my job is to write speeches for leaders, my job is to write emails for leaders, my job is to translate their murky message into something coherent that people can hear. Right. How do we create responsive, fluid systems? How do we get our leaders closer to the voice of their employees, closer to the voice of the consumer? We do it actually quite well in the markets, right, around consumers, we don't do as well when it comes to our internal employees, right? So how do we get closer to them? How do we demonstrate that we care? How do we demonstrate that they have a role in participating in the direction and the shape of this company, and use communications as a mechanism to do that, right? How do we actually demonstrate that we're not just looking for short-term extraction and value, but that we are thinking about the longer arc? And what does that look like? And how do we all
Right.
ensure that we're aligned towards that, right? Communications can play a role in all 6 of these levers, right? Either helping show where it's really happening, right? Or where it's not, right? And so with that mindset, like, how might you make changes in the way that you work and the way that you work with leadership and your employees, so that you become a bridge builder truly, not just someone holding and stabilizing?
Yeah, amazing. That analogy has carried us through. Thank you, Jen. I'm going to head on over to the Q&A. There have been some questions I haven't kept track on in the chat. So if you have a question you would like to ask Jen, please use the Q&A box. Jen, I'm going to head over to one of the questions that we've got, and then I would love some final golden nuggets that you can leave our audience with today. So the question I've got here from Laurel, thank you very much for your question, Laurel. Any recommendations, Jen, for how to manage rapid organizational changes that are being made at the last minute, hindering the effectiveness of our communications?
Whew. Yeah, that's hard, right? Because obviously someone somewhere feel like this sort of rapid change, these changes are necessary for the enduring nature of the business, right? But somewhere, someone in some room has to raise their hand and say, excuse me, how are we considering the long tail whiplash that this is having on the organization? Right? Someone has to have that hard conversation to understand, like, how do we convey the urgency? Is there intentionality behind this in a way that we can help people understand it? Can we make this feel less like it is last minute and more like part of a strategy, a part of a plan? How do we unravel some of the intensity? But before we answer these questions, let's understand how the organization is metabolizing all of these changes, right? So I often say to people, like, you could say, actually, I'll tell a funny story real quick. I'll say, like, you have a little toddler, that's like 3 or 4, and comes up to you and says, hey, mommy, daddy, I want to know what sex is. And you're like, what? Like, I wasn't prepared for that at 3 or 4, right? Like, so you go into this like long answer about what sex is. And you look down and your toddler is just staring at you with like eyes open, mouth agape, like, what? And you're like, oh, what? And they're like, I thought sex was when a boy gave a girl a flower. And you're like, yes, that is what it is, not what I just said, right? So again, before we go out and say, oh my God, we're doing organizational whiplash and everyone's in a frenzy and we have to figure out how to like get people calm down and on track, spend some time understanding what people are actually reacting to, because they may say, we understand why all like this thing's happening so fast, but what we don't understand is the fallout, the shakeout. How do we move forward? Or we don't understand what we're supposed to do with this. Like, does this mean everyone's getting fired at the last minute, right? Understand what the actual issues are. And then that's what you solve, right? That's how you respond from that place of, again, being proximate and doing it with care, such that you get the participation, you get a solution that actually will meet the needs of the moment.
Amazing. Thank you, Jen. I don't know about everyone else, but this feels like therapy. Laurel, I hope that's answered your question. One other we had during the chat, which I think was a really interesting question, and hopefully, Charmin, you don't mind me airing your question you put in the chat, but how do you get threatened execs to listen to the comms experts?
I saw that. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's going to be a very similar answer, right? So there's someone that sits with those execs, right? So I would assume that each of those execs has a comms business partner, right? Or there's a comms leader, right? Some point you have to sit down one-on-one and have the conversation around why they feel threatened, right? Because again, it's understanding before you start solving, right? So it's not like, you don't want to replay the same narrative they're playing to other people, which is like, just get on, get on the road with us or leave the company, right? So you can't have that same mirrored attitude back to them. The opportunity is to show them that there's not anything to fear. Yes, this thing that I'm professing in this moment, it is a go slow to go fast, right? It is something that takes more work, more intentionality. It takes building different systems and processes than maybe we sort of orient to naturally, right? But the question is, if we don't, then at what cost? What do we pay for down the line if we don't do this, right? And so this isn't an indictment on any individual. This is an opportunity to build an enduring system. And so the question to the leader becomes, what is it that you're afraid of? Help us understand it so that we can solve for the fear or show you that the fear is not real, right? And so across the board, what I hope more than anything else that this is about for people is that the role of humanity is missing in the way we work through our companies, right? The way we treat each other, the way we show up for each other, the way we show curiosity around things when they rise up or raise their heads, right? So treating that leader with humanity and recognizing that their threat is just their fear or their humanity showing. And instead of looking at them with skepticism or being bitter or disappointment, leaning into having curiosity around what's driving it, right? It could be their insecurities as leaders, that they feel like they're not equipped to actually navigate the level of change and transformation that's being expected of them in this moment. And so they're retreating to what they know, which is command and control. Right. So it is about offering new pathways and new sort of considerations and contemplations for how we lead during these moments. But you have to create the space for people to feel safe enough to do that.
Jen, it's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm just conscious of time, and I wanted to say a big thank you and we've got obviously another forced fun activity and an opportunity for you to leave us with one final golden nugget. But I just wanted to launch a final poll for the day as well and to say thank you for joining us. I hope you've had a therapeutic session. I definitely have. But Jen, we have a playlist, and everybody we ask all of our speakers and people we meet at events throughout the year, because I do feel if you work in internal comms a lot of the time, my goodness, like everything we've spoken about, hopefully you're relating to. So we're building a playlist, survival, just like your ultimate hype playlist. So Jen, as our speaker today, what track would you like to add to the playlist?
Okay, so my track is Golden by Jill Scott.
We said we should have played that as our Jen's entry music, but we didn't rehearse that. So we'll get it on the playlist, and please do access it. And also anybody can collab and add tracks. But this is a really nice amalgamation of this community, keeping the survival playlist strong. So Jen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jen, of course. Have you got a final golden nugget you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Oh, a final golden nugget. No pressure. I wasn't prepared for a final golden nugget. I would just say, I guess, that this was a lot probably coming from one person's mouth for an hour. But what I would offer is that this is possible work. If you just stop a little bit and provide a pause for yourself and for your teams to pay attention, to, look for where drag is sitting in the system, look for who's holding up a lot of the system or the joists that are heaviest in the system, and where are things, sort of feeling more challenging than they should be, you'll start to see things in a new light. And then from operating from that place, you'll start to do the work. It may be little, it may just be in your corner of the world, but you'll start to do the work that will make a difference.
Amazing. Jen, thank you so much. And everybody who's joined us and contributed as well, albeit we can't hear you, but thank you for contributing in the chat and bringing the vibes and some discussion. This has been a lovely community. And Jen, honestly, someone just said in the chat, could have gone on for hours, but we do that because we're both chatterboxes. But very cathartic and a really good way to start thinking about things and maybe getting out of your maintenance and operator world as well to try and maybe fix some of these foundational things. Jen, thank you so much. And everybody, happy Wednesday. We will be snippeting this up, sharing more content, and hopefully continue to work with Jen because isn't she just fabulous? But thanks, gang. Happy Wednesday. And yeah, we'll see you all very soon, hopefully on another Blink session.
Thank you so much. Bye.